In the southlands of the crafting earth, deep inside the uncarved foam caverns, a legendary treasure is hidden. Deep inside the cavern mines, the dwarf crafter looks for the ancient crafting manuscripts. It was inside, in one of the old chambers where the treasure was found, still sealed with the ancient hot glue and filled with crafting materials, where the dungeon tile manuscript was finally found. Working for hours, hammering, cutting, hot gluing, and dry brushing, he finally created perfect dungeon tiles. Cheap and fast to make. Indestructible. Unbreakable.
Hello everyone, Machuca here, and after that cringy intro, let's proceed with the first official episode of the Forbidden Craftacomb. Like other channels, I want to put my 2 cents and start with the dungeon tile tutorials. We are not reinventing the wheel here, just to clarify, but I'd like to show some cheap materials that I commonly use in my builds. The material that you are watching right now is craft foam, also known as foamy where I live. It's basically thin sheets of EVA foam. You can find them in many craft stores in Mexico. They'll sell them in letter size and come in different colors and textures. With this, I can save some time painting base colors and just focus on the painting details. The price is also extremely cheap, the equivalent of 25 American cents. We will also be using actual vinyl floor tiles, the ones that have the sticky bag on the side. I have tons of these lying around on the house. They are sturdy enough, but easy to cut with scissors. We will start by drawing a grid on our floor tile with a black marker. The measurements that I use are 6 cm intervals on each side of the square, to end with a grid of 6 cm by 6 cm squares. I really don't like to use measurements except for when I feel it's needed, like in this case. I choose 6 cm tiles because in the future I'm planning to add optional walls and other features to the tiles in case it's needed. By the way, the equivalent of 6 cm is 2.36 inches, just in case you're not probably using the metric system. Here you can see I'm matching and marking the 6 cm intervals on each side of the square. And here you can see I'm marking the X's that will be cut off of the final 6 cm grid. Without the intervals marked, we will proceed on the opposite side of the square. I think at this point it's pretty self-explanatory what I'm doing. I will proceed to remove the back paper of the floor tile. I bought this big craft foam sheet that I will be using to cover the back of the tile. The EVA foam will add extra weight and texture that will provide more grip to the surface to avoid moving the pieces once they are laid on the table. After this, I'll proceed to cut the excess EVA foam of the dungeon tiles with my X-Acto knife. With this done, now I can cut away the excess of the floor tile and have the individual shapes that I want for my dungeon. Here you can see I forgot to mark the excess of the dungeon tile, so I mark it down to cut it away next. I'll cut all along the black line of the grid, following as close as possible. This will also be done when we start cutting the individual squares for our tiles. We try to follow the lines as close as possible and we make sure the sides match. Look, even in an industrial process, a machine can make mistakes, so you shouldn't worry too much. Just try to follow the measurements as close as possible. These vinyl floor tiles measure 31 centimeters on each side, so if we follow this process we can rapidly end with 25 6x6 dungeon tile squares. Thanks to how easily this material can be cut, we can have a full mega dungeon set in no time. Now I'll grab the excess black craft foam and cut small squares 2 centimeters approximately. These don't need to be exact, they will be used to mark the 4 spaces of movement inside each square tile for our miniatures. As long as you can represent the 4 spaces inside, you are okay. I will cut away the corners of the squares and also some chunks. This is clearly inspired by Wylochs dungeon tiles. I will leave a link in the description to his video, just in case you have been living under a rock all this time and you haven't watched it. At this point, I'll paint the base color of the vinyl floor tile. Normally I will paint after gluing all together, but I want to avoid having a hard time painting between the squares. Here I'm gluing the squares of the tile. The hot glue melts the EVA foam and creates a very strong bond with the tile. On a side note, I'm learning a lot about video editing with these videos. I plan to change the camera angles in future videos so they look more interesting. Please, any feedback that you have is very welcome. Okay, we're gonna paint our dungeon tile with a gray scheme. Just the usual, just stipple the paint. We're using acrylic paint here. We're gonna leave some black areas to have that stone texture. Okay, so we're almost finished here. The main difference with these dungeon tiles is the materials. As you can see, the vinyl floor is easy to cut, but it's very resistant and strong for our game pieces. The craft foam is very cheap and comes in many different colors and textures. I will be showing you some of those different variations on the future. Here I'm just highlighting with white, nothing too fancy. I'm using black acrylic painting to draw some cracks on the floor. When you use acrylic paint, thin it down with water until you have a consistency similar to ink. When you can move your brush along a surface like a pen without getting stuck on the surface, it's perfect to draw with it. Here you can see me add a white highlight alongside the lines that I painted to give it a more 3D look. And here is a basic 4 square dungeon tile finish. Now I'm gonna show you my dungeon set with other shapes that I have made for my game. As you can see, there's a lot of different shapes, a lot of squares, because really they are really fast to make. Here are some bigger pieces. This is a small stair. Here are some smaller tiles, 2 square pieces for small corridors. Single squares, just grab a basic dungeon tile and cut it in 4 pieces. These ones are painted in a color scheme inspired by Castle Grayskull from He-Man. These were the first dungeon tiles that I created with these materials. The whole set was probably built in a week. Curved pieces. I'm gonna link you to Wylochs instructional videos for the construction of this piece. Just follow the instructions and adjust the measurements. This corner or diagonal tiles, just cut a basic square tile on half. And finally, these 2 big rooms for boss encounters. You can see here that I carved the foam with a soldering iron, but I wasn't completely satisfied with the results, so I decided to just paint the cracks on the floors. Here are some quick instructions and measurements in case you need them for the rest of the pieces. Now, with this variety of pieces, you can quickly build different layouts for your games and keep making your dungeons bigger and bigger. On future videos, I'll show you how to create features for your dungeon. As I mentioned before, please tell me in the comments your opinions. What do you want to see? Any doubts that you may have? I'm still working on improving this channel. We have a long road ahead, but I'm very excited to keep adding more content and sharing my ideas. On the next video, we will go deeper into the earth and learn how to make cavern tiles. This was Juan Machuca of the Forbidden Craftacomb.